With Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. At Biden's presser yesterday, there was significant discussion about the potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. And President Biden mentioned that he has had frank discussions with dictator Vladimir Putin, that they know where each other stands, which is maybe why he announced that Russia would be invading Ukraine. Maybe Putin is so
minor
unintimidated by Biden and what he is likely to do that he just told him straight away. Probably not. But this response from Biden about sort of threshold level invasion and then what it would draw in terms of response from the U.S. Certainly concerned those in Kiev.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia if they further invade Ukraine, and that our allies and partners are ready to impose severe cost and significant harm on Russia and the Russian economy.
But only if the incursion is significant, et cetera, et cetera. It's remarkable to me there was no follow-up from anybody in the press corps there. What does that mean exactly? So what is it what line does Russia have to cross before there's a response from the West, whether it's sanctions or something else? And what are they allowed to do that will draw no response?
I mean, he just failed to project an image of strength to begin with. And then, there is no follow-up. Like, how many troops have to be, amassed on the front in order for you to do something?
Well, later on, when it was asked again in a different way, he said, only one person knows what's going to happen there, and that's Vlad Putin. Well, it sounds like you've already made the decision for Vlad there, Joe. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Dan Henninger, deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you today, Dan.
So that statement in particular, and other statements about Russia and Ukraine were so unsettling. Even CNN's Dana Bash was heard to say, "Clean up on aisle State Department."
Yeah, and no surprise, I sat and rode the magical mystery tour with Joe Biden for the whole 2 hours. Taking notes along the way, and I got to tell you guys, when he said it depends on whether it's a minor incursion, I really sat up straight. You can imagine we'd get a editorial page, exchange notes with each other, and there was a quick round of emails exchanged over that. Think, did he really say that? And then he doubled down on it and seemed to suggest further that something along those lines were possible. Now, you've got to think that Vladimir Putin himself leaned forward from his couch.
Right.
And, did I really hear what I was hearing? And as a deeper policy note, Dan, he then went on to talk somehow about the need for NATO solidarity and how we all have to be on the same page. I'm going to just go on a limb and say my reading of this is that Germany is exercising a veto over military action in Ukraine. But that's terrible if true. Obviously, they're divided, but it is the role of the United States president to lead, whether or not you've got all 28 NATO nations on board, and he's not leading.
Yeah, and what happened in Afghanistan that set a poor precedent, and then this yesterday, I mean, it's a terrible moment for Biden, but he looks weak against Russia and China. Because that they were watching that yesterday.
Yeah, he knows they're watching, and the Afghan disaster is undoubtedly what has incentivized Vladimir Putin to move mass 100,000 troops on Ukraine's border, and for China to engage in these extraordinarily aggressive overflights, military jet fighter overflights of Taiwan. They are pushing the edge of the envelope. And in Ukraine, Putin is right at the edge of the envelope. And, one other thing, Biden is he must drive his people crazy. I mean, we know, and it has been reported here earlier in the week, that there was some expectation in the White House that Putin was going to invade. They undoubtedly are talking about that. But then the president, none of them said that publicly. I mean, it was just sort of being circulated in the news. And Joe Biden goes out in public and more or less makes it explicit what they're trying to say sotto voce behind the scenes, and says it in a way that just disrupts the Ukrainians and everyone else who's been trying to push back. It was very upsetting. I mean, I think what he essentially was saying there is eastern Ukraine is gone. And you've got Ukrainians and soldiers out there standing against the Russians. And I guess one question is, why should they stand there and die if the United States is going to regard a rollover into the Donbass, the way they went into Crimea or Georgia, as a minor incursion?
Well,
certainly the White House cleaned up with a statement afterwards, but the damage has been done.
right. And also, too, you have people not saying behind closed doors now that we're looking at war in Europe like we haven't seen since World War II. So what that sort of flippant statement from Biden certainly causes concern. I mean, concern in Ukraine, yes, but concern in the entire Western world.
Yeah, it does. And what is essentially needed there in Ukraine is not the idea that we're going to go to war with them, but we need to send a significant deterrent into Ukrainians who've been asking for anti-tank weapons, anti-missile weapons, to defend them against a Russian invasion on their own. We're not talking about sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight alongside the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are willing to do that on their own if they have sufficient support. But, we could talk all day about the Afghan war, but the fact is the United States pulled the plug on the Afghan army at the end there, such as pulling out of Bagram Air Force Base. And the Ukrainians are similarly saying, just arm us, give us the wherewithal to resist a Russian invasion. That's the deterrent that we need over there right now, not abandoning the Ukrainians or simply sending them money.
On another topic, you wrote an excellent piece, Omicron has killed certitude. And it's sort of my thinking as well, what I've been saying, which is we're way past the time of trying to have rational conversations about various studies in various medical journals and data points and what the thresholds are for the spread or for cases, hospitalizations, deaths, such that we modulate policy in one direction or the other. We're past all that because the American public has tuned out.
It has tuned out in a state of mass confusion. And I wrote about the death of certitude, pegging it to the fact that political leaders, and indeed through this period, scientific leaders like Anthony Fauci, would go out there night after night and seem to suggest they were in complete control of the situation. They were following, quote unquote, the science, and the science was the reason we had to, over the past 2 years, do lockdowns, shutting down the economy, wearing masks, doing social distancing. And along comes Omicron, which can infect people who've been vaccinated 3 times at a much lower rate. I will say the sickness is much lower. And there's no clarity at all about the pandemic. And so now I think it is a good thing that this kind of authoritarian streak that we went through with the political leaders and the scientists has been knocked down a peg, that the era of COVID certitude is over, and that we'll now go forward dealing with it as an endemic disease and with a lot more intellectual modesty out of our leadership, because that is what caused people to just simply stop paying attention to them.
Well, we're in Chicago. You have to pay attention to it because you can't go to a restaurant, a movie, bowling alley. You can't do anything here without a vaccine passport. But yesterday, the big, huge news was that the UK said COVID's over. We're getting rid of mask mandates, everything. And President Biden, when asked about what the normal is going to look like, didn't even mention that. I mean, it sounds like we're going to continue this, in perpetuity forever, because he said the new normal is going to be trying to vaccinate the 30 million Americans who are not vaccinated.
Well, he got the huge loss in the Supreme Court over vaccine mandate as it applies to private businesses. So that's not going to happen. And they've reverted now to setting up this website to get masks to people and testing kits. But, as he said a couple of weeks ago, this is not a federal solution. The states are going to have to get involved. And that, Amy, is where we are going. Governors across this country are going to start revising COVID policies in a way that reflects the fact that we're going to have to live with it. And it's pretty clear, I think, that most governors are now trying to resist shutting things down. They're trying to keep the schools open. They're trying to get life to return to normal. So I think the president and the White House are increasingly becoming an unhappy bystander to the resolution of COVID after 2 years. It's being cleaned up out there in the states. And I'm happy to see that, quite frankly.
Yeah, and the phrase that you mentioned, intellectual modesty, I don't think that we're going to get that ultimately from these government functionaries and politicians and even some of these, public health TV stars now. It seems to me, hopefully, one of the takeaways is, be careful about how much you think you can bend nature to your will through your elected officials and governmental institutions. Maybe the hope is that there's more modesty in terms of being so locked in to what these people say you're supposed to do unquestioningly. I'm hoping post-COVID, as we learn to live with it, as you said, that there is more pushback coming, more skepticism or intellectual curiosity that will take hold in the American electorate.
Well, pushback is the word, Dan. I mean, one of the biggest problems, and the one that I identified in that column, was the degree to which the scientific authorities suppressed dissent and disagreement. There were serious scientists out there who disagreed with the course that people like Tony Fauci had taken the country on. And those people were pushed aside, just as they are often pushed aside in the debate over climate and climate change. And what one really hopes to see now is more attention given and more respect to people who dissent in science. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm talking about very serious individuals engaged in science who have alternative views of what is going on during something like a pandemic. And next time around, that hopefully would allow us to produce a more sensible policy rather than one that's simply imposed by fiat by Washington and the federal government.
He is Daniel Henninger, deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, a lot of you know that I learned how to use a firearm when I was 11 years old. I've been practicing my entire life, and people ask me all the time, Hannity, what kind of gun should I get? Well, now I'm telling them, go to Henry Repeating Arms. And I always tell them to start just by going to their website, henryusa.com.